when ancient canyons lie coated in white. Snowfall caps giant sequoias. High alpine lakes freeze over. And majestic peaks light up a lapis sky. 'Tis the season for America's national parks.
Come on, guys, come on.
Those who brave the chill are transformed by the exhilarating beauty, the solitude, the rugged wildlife, and the warmth of a vintage lodge. From the high alpine terrain to the lower woodlands of the Sierra Nevada, in Northern California, it's Christmas at Yosemite. A time when snow outlines the cliff faces and trees to reveal all the innuendos of geology.
Oftentimes you don't have the sound, and that in itself is kind of an experience. It's kind of like, what some of these great jazz musicians say. What's important is not the actual note, but it's the space between the notes. Wintertime can be those spaces between those notes that are playing, and that can be as profound as the note itself.
Over eons, water and ice miraculously carved 3,000 feet of solid granite into a masterpiece. Born in the high country, glaciers began to flow into Yosemite Valley during the ice ages.
The Merced River cut into the Merced Canyon here, of which Yosemite Valley is just a small part of. That basically excavated this very steep, deep, what we call V-shaped canyon. And with the advent of the Ice Age and the glaciations, those glaciers started to pluck rock from these walls and the bedrock floor, and that V-shaped canyon slowly started to be literally plucked into much more of a U shape. It was broader and deeper.
The arrival of winter brings snow and rain to refuel Yosemite Falls. In 3 pristine tiers, water drops over 2,400 feet to the valley floor. Mist from the falls freezes into sheets of ice. Under the weight, ice sections break off. Frozen spray creates another natural phenomenon. An ice cone at the foot of the upper fall may rise several hundred feet high.
And that snow cone builds and builds and builds. Late winter, early spring, you can easily see that snow cone from a distance.
Across the valley, Bridal Veil Falls' lacy mist turns to ice. Powered by the Merced River, Vernal and Nevada Falls flow year-round.
What I love about Yosemite is storms come in, they're generally very fast-moving Sierra storms, and they'll dump snow for a half a day or a couple of hours, and then they'll have beautiful blue sky.
The blend of sky, rock, water, and trees set the Sierra Nevada apart. Nestled in the shadow of an enormous granite face, the Ahwahnee Hotel is an American castle. Known as the Queen of National Park Lodges, architect Gilbert Stanley Underwood created rooms to make you feel like you're standing in the canyon. Looking like an English manor, the designers had a world vision. 22 regions are represented in the interior. True to Yosemite's past, they incorporated themes and patterns from Native American basket weavers. Each December, huge wreaths adorn the walk-in fireplaces. Christmas trees light up the rooms as the hotel becomes holiday central. and home to the Bracebridge Dinner.
The Bracebridge is everyone's idea of a wonderful Christmas. It's the Christmas that really never was, but everybody holds in their heart.
I bid ye welcome to Bracebridge Hall.
The annual feast is based on a tale by Washington Irving set in 17th century England. The Bracebridge began a tradition of celebrating the season at Yosemite in 1927. From the beginning, famed photographer Ansel Adams was part of the play.
When he was the Lord of Misrule, or the jester, he would climb the rocks. There are big rocks on each side of the stage, which is built up to be the squire's head table. And he somehow would get a footing, and he would climb up those rocks while the audience went, "Ah!" So that was usually his big trick.
Over 80 years later, the pageant has grown in grandeur. A cast of over 60 play the roles of the Lord of Misrule, the Squire, his family, servants, minstrels, and performers. At its core, an opulent 7-course meal is a challenge. Behind the scenes, the Ahwahnee kitchen preps to serve 2,100 courses a night over 8 nights.
Being such a grand event, and it all has to be done in a procession when all the food goes out at the same time. So we have to design the menu that we're able to logistically incorporate all of those items onto the plate. So we start plating kind of frantically, a little bit of composed chaos or controlled chaos, and we have 7 minutes to do the peacock pie course. That's 300 plates in 7 minutes.
Praise up!
The traditional English feast hasn't changed over the years, with a few exceptions.
It's always been a soup and a peacock pie, or a fish and then a peacock pie, and then the beef. There is not peacock in the pie. I just take creative elements and put that in there to bring it up to a little modern times. But really, the idea is an old traditional English feast.
A feast and festivities fit for an old-fashioned Christmas.
There's so much that is missing these days with a Christmas that is spent normally in the city with the Christmas presents and the shopping. I think the Bracebridge allows people to break away from that and come to something where there's more. There's nature here, there's marvelous music. And I think that timelessness is what people feel when they come here.
In the spirit of timeless traditions, a holiday on ice under Half Dome. One of a few outdoor ice rinks in the West, it has been around since the 1930s. Roasting s'mores around an open fire can be the perfect way to end a December day. From Glacier Point, the grand scale of the Sierra Nevada spreads out before you. At an elevation of 7,200 feet, you can see Yosemite Valley and beyond. Carved by ice, domed formations have a smooth, polished side. Half Dome and El Capitan are called nunatex, meaning lonely peak.
During this massive glaciation in the Sierra here, not everything was completely covered by glacier. So those peaks that protruded above that glacial ice sheet are what are referred to as nunatex.
Nunatex provide a sense of the vast scale of the glaciers that once filled the entire valley. 95% of the park is designated as wilderness. Trans-Sierra treks at 7,000 to 9,000 feet are a challenge. Hardy souls head out to cross-country ski. But you don't have to snow camp. For those who book in advance, the Glacier Point Ski Hut offers food and shelter. Sunny days find visitors hitting the slopes. Badger Pass, the only downhill resort in a national park, opened in 1935 under the banner of the Little Switzerland of the West.
There was also an Olympic bid. The company at the time, the Yosemite Park and Curry Company, thought that winter sports in Yosemite were so wonderful that they actually put in a formal bid at the time for the Winter Olympics. We did not get them, but the tradition of winter activity here in Yosemite has endured.
Oh, no!
Over 350 miles of trails lure snowshoers.
So snowshoeing is relatively easy. The thing you want to make sure not to do is point your toe forward when you normally do, like you walk. If you do that, you could possibly run the risk of falling over. What you want to do is just lift your foot as one and try not to point your toes as much. And if you just do that and follow those rules, you should be good to go.
From Badger Pass, a guided walk winds through a dense forest.
As you guys can see, this is mostly a forest of pine trees. We have different types of pine trees. We have cedar trees and ponderosa pines. We have fir trees as well. We also have 3 very special groves. We have 3 groves of giant sequoia trees. One of those groves is called the Mariposa Grove. It is our biggest grove and it's on the south side of the park. That is where you will find our biggest trees and the most of our giant sequoia trees.
These snow-laden sequoias, over 3,000 years old, are among the largest living things on Earth by volume. Coniferous trees and a fairly mild climate create a lush habitat. Deep in the Sierran woods, a woodpecker power drills for insects. A pair of spotted owls nest high in the pines to get an overview. Sharp talons are used to capture prey feeding on the forest floor. Mule deer, the park's only deer species, hunker down to conserve energy. Called the brush wolf, the coyote is small but mighty. It's been more successful than the larger wolf species. With a nose to the ground, the coyote picks up scent and sound. Ever adept at the close stalk. When it's time for comfort and joy, the Wawona Hotel on the park's southern border beckons. Decked out for a Dickens-style Christmas past, the hotel first opened its doors in 1879. With high ceilings and period furniture, this National Historic Landmark has hosted both presidents and poets. Cider, cookies, and hot chocolate are served as the resort's resident musician plays Christmas carols on a 1906 grand piano.
The Wawona Hotel, all of these years, has resisted the temptation of installing TV sets or radios or even phones. So we were forced to resort to analog entertainment, to piano entertainment and singing. And the beauty of that is that this very room is where Estella Washburn, back in 1885, started playing piano. She was the manager's wife. and she moved in her upright piano right against the wall there, and she'd sing for the guests, and the guests would come in after dinner and stand around the piano and sing.
The Wawona occupies a spot where Galen Clark, one of the first settlers, built a log cabin in 1857. An early guardian and explorer of the park, he lobbied for its protection along with his friend John Muir, who once described the Sierra as clean and pure and full of divine lessons. Known as the Valley of Light, Yosemite glows in the softer rays of the setting sun. In the raw wilderness of northern Wyoming, fire and ice collide with breathtaking results. Christmas in Yellowstone is unearthly. Geothermals bubble up from a massive volcano lurking beneath the surface. Geysers explode in a chorus of steam. The howls of wolves echo across Lamar Valley.
Winter in the park is an amazing time of year. It's a very harsh beauty. There's an intense solitude associated with it, but it's nature, in my viewpoint, almost at its finest.
When outdoor temperatures teeter below zero, it's a land of contrasts. At Mammoth Hot Springs, superheated water flowing from the mountain brings dissolved limestone to the surface to create steaming travertine terraces. Around the edges of geysers and hot springs, steam and hot vapors turn to frost, coating the trees for a ghostly effect. While bison huddle around the hot spots for warmth. Along the collapsed caldera of the Yellowstone Plateau, heat flow values are abnormally high.
And that's because molten rock is just a few miles under our feet here, and that creates the heat. But another key factor for the thermal features is moisture. And as you can tell from the snow coming down now, Yellowstone is ideally situated to capture lots of moisture. So we have everything we need for the hydrothermal features. We have the water and we have the heat here.
At Norris Geyser Basin, extreme heat melts the snow beneath your feet. Mud pots gurgle and pop. Fumaroles let off some steam. Only a few thermal features are under the boiling point.
You get to see the effects that winter has on a geyser very nicely. As it erupts, you can see the balls of steam come out, and then because they're so hot compared to the air temperature, they leave very nice arcs, almost like balls of fire. So it's one of the advantages you have of viewing geysers in the winter.
Upper Geyser Basin holds the park's largest concentration of geysers. Among them, Old Faithful's predictable plumbing has made it famous. First, it overflows for a few minutes. Then, with a roar of steam, Old Faithful ejects up to 8,400 gallons of water 1 to 200 feet into the air. In a parallel world, a multitude of creatures have adapted to sub-zero temperatures. Yellowstone and neighboring Grand Teton National Park are part of Greater Yellowstone, one of the most pristine ecosystems in the lower 48 states. When the mercury drops, herds of pronghorn migrate to warmer elevations. Built for the cold, bison are more comfortable now. Traveling in tight-knit family units, they're always on the move. Shaking their powerful heads from side to side, they brush off snowpack to get to the grasses buried beneath. By December, the scarcity of food causes Yellowstone's bears to den up for a long winter's nap. Yet it's not always a deep sleep. A lone grizzly emerges from hibernation for a meal. At the top of the food chain, America's national emblem, the bald eagle, swoops in for a catch. A diet of fish narrows the eagle's home range.
We actually have more bald eagles here in the winter than in the summertime. We have more trumpeter swans here in the winter than we do in the summertime. But one of the neat things about the wintertime is that every animal that goes anywhere in the park leaves a tail in the snow. So you can see who's been around by the tracks that you see in the snow, even if you don't get a chance to see the animal itself.
Elk tracks lead to Lamar Valley. In the northern part of the park, a relatively warmer climate, less snowfall, and a water source, the Lamar River attracts herds en masse. It is a precarious time. As nutritious food becomes scarce, the population weakens. The gray wolf frequents the wide-open valley, ever alert for potential prey. For the park's wolf packs, winter is the mating season.
The gray pup had something from the carcass in that area, so...
Wildlife biologists observe their secret lives. A social beast, people can relate to the pack.
Their pack is their family. You can feel the feelings that they have for their pack mates. You kind of have that with your siblings or your mother, and you can see when they howl to each other, they're communicating. I don't know, there's just all these certain dynamics that you can see between them.
Once deliberately killed off by rangers, the gray wolf was reintroduced to the park in 1995. Since then, this top predator has had an impact.
When the wolves were brought back in '95, very quickly they reduced the coyote numbers by about 50%. Now, on the other hand, we think that the grizzly bears have increased in numbers due to the return of the wolves. So when the wolves kill something like an elk, they have the strength and the power to take over the carcass.
Studying Yellowstone's wolves since their arrival, one Christmas day, biologist Rick McIntyre observed a miracle in the animal kingdom. When a coyote crept up to steal a carcass, the wolf pack attacked.
All the other members of the pack ran over, and you could see them attacking the coyote. It seemed that it was a little bit quicker than usual that they left. They went back to sleep. But I saw two little ears and then two eyes peer out of the snow, looked at the wolves, and then he just trotted off. So the wolves just taught him a lesson on that particular Christmas day. They gave him a free pass.
In the heart of the park, the deep gash of Yellowstone's Grand Canyon reveals yellow rock. Cut by the swift currents of the Yellowstone River, it's a rugged palette. As temperatures reach extremes, the margin for error narrows. Windswept snowdrifts transform Hayden Valley into a surreal Saharascape. Another product of fire and ice, Lake Yellowstone freezes over. This largest high-altitude lake in North America was formed by a depression in the caldera during the last major volcanic eruption.
Everything looks very different. You could see one area in the summer and come back in the winter and you might not even realize it's the same location because the way the snow changes things, the way the light hits things. just the crispness in the air, you feel alive. You can feel the weather here. You can feel Yellowstone. You really become a part of it in the winter.
Yuletide at Yellowstone may appear serene, but make no mistake, it is a volatile environment prone to swarms of earthquakes.
Most were not felt. They're what we call micro-earthquakes. Individuals ask us then, are the earthquakes seasonal? And short answer is absolutely not. But if you look at the past 15 years of earthquake swarm data, the swarms can occur at any time. They do occur at any time, and they go sometimes longer than this swarm, sometimes shorter than this swarm. Basically, we can't predict when swarms will occur, where they will occur, or their magnitudes. Yellowstone is constantly changing. There may be other areas in the park that start uplifting or subsiding. What all the studies have shown is that's what's normal for Yellowstone. And that's one of the fascinating aspects of Yellowstone, is to be here and be observant and watch those changes.
As part of the Earth tilts away from the sun, solstice sets in. The gift of the world's first national park is apparent. Over 130 years later, it still symbolizes to Americans all that is awe-inspiring. In a season filled with wonders, Yellowstone and bordering Grand Teton National Park are magical. Like the rest of the Rocky Mountain region, glaciers were the architects. Yellowstone was once covered by a 4,000-foot thick ice cap that subdued its topography. The outer reaches of the ice, extending south, had a different effect, sculpting the jagged front range of the Rockies. People have been living in the shadows of the Tetons for more than 11,000 years. Near the border of Grand Teton National Park, the former frontier outpost of Jackson Hole looks like a picture postcard. For the holidays, the main square's signature antler arch twinkles with lights. In a town that's king of the hill, families gear up for a torchlight tradition. By day, the Jackson Hole Mountain Resort lures skiers and snowboarders up the highest contiguous vertical rise in the U.S. to a world-class playground. With over 400 inches of annual snowfall, the Teton backcountry spreads out in all directions for in and out-of-bounds skiing like no other. To cover more ground, guided heliskiers move from mountain to mountain in search of virgin powder. Back on flatland, there are no reindeer to pull sleighs. It's dog power.
Go! Up, up.
Mushers employ an age-old way of moving over snow.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Inside Grand Teton National Park, it's not about speed.
Probably the most popular in Grand Teton is cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. And then for those folks who are really serious mountaineers, there's lots and lots of expeditionary skiing and mountaineering in the high country, in the Teton Range.
Northern latitude and the position of the park on the continent make a rigorous habitat for wildlife. When temperatures dip to -20 and below, there's renewed respect for the creatures that tough it out. Along calm waters, a pair of trumpeter swans glide. Named for their trumpet-like bugle, this largest waterfowl in North America feeds on aquatic vegetation. Their biggest threat? The coyote, always on the lookout for the next meal. Extreme temperatures imperil the elk population. In 1912, conditions were so dire that a national elk refuge was created on the border of the park. Elk feeding grounds are ancestral. Generation after generation have been coming to the refuge ever since. Horse-drawn sleighs tour this world's largest herd of wintering elk.
When you see so many of them in one place, I mean, it's a particularly powerful experience. There are about 13,000 elk in the Jackson elk herd, and they spend their summers in Yellowstone National Park, Grand Teton National Park, and on surrounding national forest lands.
Elk migration is an odyssey that begins as early as October. When seasons intensify, herds come from as far as 100 miles. Where the elk go, wolves are sure to follow.
Well, we have wolves that have been on the refuge since about 1999, and they do kill elk, there's no question about that. In general, they take the old and the sick. Whether they're having an undue influence on the elk population is too early to say. Because they're a threatened species on the refuge, they actually have a higher management priority than the elk.
Naturalists are on board to interpret, but there's plenty of quiet time.
They're just such beautiful animals, especially the males when they hold up their head and they're walking and carrying their large rack of antlers, and just the way they step, even when you see them and they're kind of trotting along, they're absolutely beautiful animals.
In the spring, the elk make the long journey home.
Animals have adapted. They have several adaptations that enable them to stay active, just like they do in the summer, through the winter. One of the adaptations that we see with moose is that they have very long legs, and they have a unique gait where they can actually pick their feet straight up out of a hole in the snow, for example, move it forward and place it down, and this allows them to move through the snow much more efficient than, say, an elk or a bison or a pronghorn.
Not all plants are created equal. A moose sniffs out the most nutritious ones. Like other species, conservation of energy is a strategy to survive frigid temperatures.
And that's kind of their pattern throughout the day. They will lay down right in the same area, get up and forage, in this case on a nice bitterbrush patch that happens to be here.
On a hillside, bighorn sheep forage for food. Most comfortable in high country with a sentinel view, they try to avoid predators. Sure-footed, with a stocky body and powerful legs, bighorn sheep are remarkably graceful on icy rock. Along the valley floor, a pair of bison butt heads. Nearby, the Triangle X Ranch reopens for the winter season on December 26th. At this only working dude ranch inside a national park, real wranglers create an authentic Western experience, where the art of saddle making is still a cold weather pastime.
We transformed the ranch into kind of a winter wonderland.
Can I get you guys anything else right now?
And it's great to have the guests come in the morning and get a cup of hot chocolate and a hot cup of coffee and then come out and feed the horses with us.
Owned and operated by 4 generations of the Turner family, generations of visitors return year after year to their cozy home away from home. From the ranch, cross-country skiers set out for the serenity of the backcountry, while a snowmobiler prefers full-throttle travel. When the snow drapes its wintry blanket across the Teton peaks, a tranquility settles in.
There's any number of really just magical moments in the wintertime in Grand Teton National Park. Some of that could be just being out on a really crystal clear day when it's maybe 10, 15, 20 below, and you get this diamond dust in the air that twinkles. It looks like fairy dust. It's just magical. Or seeing the sunrises and the sunsets, which have a different kind of character in the wintertime than it does in the summertime.
A vital time. Mountains collect water in the form of snow and ice. By spring, snowpack melts to fill the streams flowing into the Snake River, a major waterway supporting ecosystems hundreds of miles downstream, nourishing plants that provide food for the animals. And the wondrous cycle of life continues. Proclaimed a wonder of the world, one of nature's most spectacular creations, the Grand Canyon is a sight to behold in any season. When cliffs collect a layer cake of snow and the sun casts long shadows on canyon walls, this titanic wonder takes on added drama. In the splendor of the season, you'll feel like John Wesley Powell, one of the first explorers who simply called it the Great Unknown.
Because this is a good spot to be able to look really far down in. All right, so even after a big winter storm like we just had overnight, you can see that the snow doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the canyon. Winter's great because hardly anybody's here. You have the trails to yourselves almost.
Perched on the edge of the Grand Canyon, the landmark lodge El Tovar gets ready to celebrate the season. At the canyon's premier place to stay, the raising of the tree in the center of the lobby heralds the arrival of the holidays.
They pull up the chandelier, they put this gorgeous tree, it's all decorated up, there's poinsettias around the lobby, and you walk in and you really do feel like you're in a real holiday tradition, and it's beautiful, it's something even the residents, people who live here, we all come up.
Opened in 1905, the part Norwegian lodge, part Swiss chalet was originally designed to appeal to visitors from the East. For historians and chocoholics, a meal in the vintage dining room is topped off with an array of treats, including a chocolate log cabin reminiscent of Bucky's cabin, one of the first places to stay on the South Rim. Across from El Tovar, Hopi House was designed to pay homage to the indigenous cultures of the canyon.
The building itself was built in 1905, and it really was a home for many of the local tribal artisans who lived there at the turn of the century, creating art for tourists who were arriving on the railroad.
Today, the train continues an historic rim run that began at the turn of the 20th century. Visitors arrive just steps away from the supreme spectacle. December is a season of solitude. Those who brave the chill have the canyon mostly to themselves. Along the vast sweep of the Colorado Plateau, scale is difficult to grasp. From the Desert View Watchtower, the Colorado River is a winding sliver visible from only a few spots. It may seem like the river was once as wide as the canyon, but it's more complicated.
From a geological perspective, the canyon is deepening and widening as we speak. So today, inevitably, we'll warm up above the freezing point, and some of the snow around us will melt and trickle into the various cracks and fissures along the rim. At night, we'll drop below freezing, and that water will freeze and therefore expand. And just over time, incrementally, it'll be pulling the rocks apart.
As the Colorado River cuts its way through millions of years of rock, season after season, rockfall after rockfall, the canyon continues to evolve. Snow and whiteout conditions change the epic journey into the canyon. Mules require special shoes to maneuver steep slopes, a job that begins with a little TLC.
Yeah, it's kind of like a manicure. And I just look down it to see if it's good and flat and level. You want it to be as level as it possibly can, because if you get the shoe on there and it's not level, then you're going to have a problem. It'll cause a little pain in the mule's foot. It'd be like if you wore a pair of shoes that were wore too much on one side. This is our winter shoe. We put Drill Tech on it. This is so they can get grip in the ice when they're going down the trailhead. And we can usually get one reset out of these shoes before we have to throw them away.
Along the South Kaibab Trail, hikers armed with footwear for traction and poles for balance slowly navigate a series of switchbacks to the inner gorge, where every step takes you back some 15,000 years. It's an exhilarating trek through layer upon layer of rock. The deeper you go, the warmer it gets. Down the 1-mile drop-off, snow and ice melt away. Crossing the Colorado River, temperatures on the canyon floor are 20 to 25 degrees warmer. Miraculously, seasons can change within one day. Animals move into the canyon in search of both food and warmth. On the banks of Bright Angel Creek, mule deer are a calming presence year-round. For creature comforts, a rustic retreat is open 365 days a year. Yet a holiday stay at Phantom Ranch is something special.
You've got families who come here every year, year after year, and bring their entire family in for Thanksgiving, for Christmas.
Inside, food and shelter are simple. Guests from all over the world share a meal and their stories. Outside, the surroundings are superb.
Wintertime at Phantom Ranch is a very special time of year because of the light. The light changes in the winter, and the contrast of the snow on the upper levels of the canyon coming down through the canyon. The colors are magnificent.
Winter plays a role in the weathering of the rock, helping to carve the famous stair-step topography of the canyon.
It's largely a difference between hard rocks and soft rocks. The hard rocks, the resilient rocks, the crystalline rocks like limestones, the well cemented together sandstones, they're very hard. And so they form the cliffs. The soft rocks, mudstone, shales, siltstones, they're exactly the opposite. They're very weak. They erode to form those slopes. And so the great thing is it seems to have almost an alternating system of hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, soft to give us that step, step, step topography that we were mentioning.
Where the top layers of rock were laid down before the age of the dinosaur, the bottom layers are 2 billion years old. Layer upon layer of rock represents one of the most complete records of geologic history in the world. In arid country, water is precious. Snowmelt feeds the springs and tributaries and all living things.
We're very spiritual here at the Grand Canyon, my tribe. So the weather is very important. Having the snow today, it's wonderful. It's back to the good days and just thanking the earth for taking care of the canyon.
As the deep freeze recharges the region, those who take the time to step back and take in the surroundings get rewarded tenfold. At America's National Treasures, another world comes out in winter. When people gather together to celebrate traditions, wildlife carry on in harmony with the grander scheme of nature. Ancient canyons continue to expand, and mountains continue to rise. As wind, water, and ice wear down the mountains, and snow melts to fuel the miracle of life, there's a profound sense of timelessness and peace on earth.